Hello G.I. Joe fans, this is Bruce Fur, and I've got another review for you here today. It's the 1994 Star Brigade G.I. Joe Lunatrix Empire figures. Now, 1994, as most of you probably know, was the last year that the original line of G.I. Joe Real American Hero toys were released. And unfortunately, it's of course probably the worst year for the toys. They made a lot of changes. They released a lot of horrible figures, and these three are probably the more infamous ones in the line because they are very not G.I. Joe. So we're going to get into the first one, which is Carcass. Okay, so here we have the full card for Carcass. Now it's a Star Brigade figure, so it's obviously a space shot here. The drawing itself actually isn't that bad. It looks kind of menacing and weird there, but it's not what we were used to seeing. They actually changed some things on these cards. The G.I. Joe logo is now here, and obviously it's a space shot in the background rather than your typical G.I. Joe kind of red around the figure and whatnot. So they've made, for better or worse, the change. Obviously, it probably wasn't the best because it was the last year of the line. And we'll go to the back, and this is where you see the biggest changes on these figures from 1994. In Hasbro's infinite wisdom, they decided to really change one of the more important things about G.I. Joe. One of the things that collectors especially loved about G.I. Joe, and that was the file card. Instead of your standard file card, they went with a smaller, almost baseball card sized file card. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but they decided to do that. And so a lot of the figures released in 1994, I believe all the Star Brigade figures, and then most of the from that year have the same card. Now, one interesting thing on these cards you see here, it says coming soon. And they say Power Fighters and Manimals. So what's interesting is the Power Fighters didn't end up coming out. There was two of them, the G.I. Joe and the Cobra one. And those were like the last two things released for G.I. Joe, like the very last two things. And they are very hard to get. If you want to get one complete or in package, you're gonna pay a pretty high price for a 1994 figure. Now the other one are the Manimals. What's interesting is those were going to be released in 95. But they were never released in the original line. And then I believe it was either 96 or 97, and I'm pretty sure 96. KB Toys got the rights, or got the exclusiveness to those and released those. And those are pretty easy to get and pretty cheap to get. And they're actually horribly made, and they're not that cool. So that was one of the horrible things we would have had to look forward to in 95. So if 94 wouldn't have been the last year, I'm pretty sure 95 would have been. So we're going to read Carcass's card here, and Carcass, his codename is Carcass. He's an alien destroyer. His birthplace is Quadrant 4, planet Mertonia, if that's how you say it. His primary military specialty is mercenary hunter, and his secondary military specialty is planetary alien destruction. Now his card reads as such: leaving nothing but broken bones and smashed dwellings in his wake, Carcass is a born menace to the universe. He has stomped through alien towns, destroying all that he can, and making prisoners of its fearful inhabitants. He has even gone so far as to mistakenly attack a Star Brigade outpost, narrowly escaping capture by ducking into an asteroid belt. His mutated body, which may account for his overly hostile attitude, is considered ugly even by other Lunatrix aliens more hideous than he. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is the way these are presented, these Lunatrix Empire figures, I'm pretty sure had we seen a new line in 95, we definitely would have seen Star Brigade. I know that for sure because I saw some of the pre-production figures that they never released. I almost guarantee we would have seen more of these Lunatrix Empires. It was like a third-party space enemy for G.I. Joe and Cobra, maybe an enemy that they both could fight. So I believe that's what they were going to be setting up for these figures. So I mean, that's pretty interesting, but really just takes a lot away from G.I. Joe. And you can just see why Hasbro was taking everything that made G.I. Joe great and forgetting that and going in a complete opposite direction. And, you know, it was one of the many reasons why 94 was the last year we saw the original line of G.I. Joes. Alright, so here we have Carcass. Carcass is, in my opinion, the worst of the three as far as what he looks like and his posability and whatnot. His weapons are green, of course, came on a tree like all figures did in 94. And nothing special there. The figure itself has your typical articulation from the waist down, but his upper body has his arms have these bendy arms. They're your typical rubber plastic with a wire in it, so you can bend it and shape it, but they don't bend easy, and it almost feels like they'd break if you bent them too much. His chest piece is clear so that you can kind of see his innards. That's kind of neat. Then he has this kind of plastic plate over those that almost looks like they could come off, but they don't. And then his head is really ugly. It's kind of like a sort of hammerhead where his eyes are off to the side here, which would, you know, really hinder his sight, I think. And so that's that figure, and he's not that exciting, and he has his hold his weapons all goofy, and, you know, so yeah, this is just a horrible figure in general. And I think I paid maybe $5 for him in package just, I think maybe 2 years ago for him. So that's Carcass. Okay, so now we have Predacon, Alien Bounty Hunter. So again, Predacon, his picture there, exact same kind of setup, and he actually looks a lot better in his picture than his toy does. A lot better. If he looked more like this, it'd be a lot cooler figure. Go to his back, the same back. Go to his file card. His code name is Predacon, which, by the way, is interesting that they use that name. Hasbro, of course, owns that name on their Transformers line. We all know what a Predacon is, and so they've used it here in G.I. Joe, which is kind of interesting, but of course there's no relation whatsoever between those two. So his birthplace is the Badlands planet Trilenium. His primary military specialty is alien tracking, and his secondary is arm wrestler. Obviously a joke there because he has 4 arms, and it's a lame joke. And it says, a vicious lunartix alien, Predacon, makes his living by capturing criminals and selling them back to the galactic authorities. If the authorities reject the criminals, Predacon imprisons them in his private alien zoo. This 4-armed monster is loyal only to his tribal clan on planet Trilenium, and he's proud to wear its ancestral medallion on his chest plate, along with lunartix hieroglyphics that are etched into his arm guards. Now, they mentioned the alien medallion, and on this photo, which is going to be hard to see, it's colored gold. Remember that, because I'm going to show you something here in a minute when I show you the figure. So here we have Predacon in his 4-armed glory. Now, remember I mentioned that emblem on his chest. If you kind of get a look at his chest here the best you can, there's no detail colored on his chest. Now, the emblem and the bandolier is there, but they're just the same blue as the rest of the piece. It really takes a lot away from this figure. Had they just done that little bit more detail, this figure would be a lot better looking. But because Hasbro decided to be cheap, as they had been for the last couple years, this figure really just isn't that awesome. One of the other big problems with him, it's cool he has 4 arms and can hold 4 weapons, as you see here, but he's a really tall figure, except he has to sit like this in order for him to stand. The way they have him is they have him hunchbacked, and then his legs are angled real funny, so if you wanted to stand him up full stretched out, he'd have to look like this. And that obviously wouldn't work. You'd have to glue him in place with super glue in order for him to stand. So instead he has to crouch down like he's going to the bathroom right there on your floor. And he has really big feet too, by the way. I mean, these feet are really clown shoes big. So that's him. Now, he has dreadlocks, and his dreadlocks are kind of neat. And I'm pretty sure these dreadlocks are Medusa style, where they would like whip around on their own and attack and whatnot. So that would be kind of neat, and it would be cool if you could pose them, but they kind of sit there. They are really delicate, so I really wouldn't move them a lot because guaranteed they're probably going to break off if you do that. So there we have Mr. Predacon.